Hello, everybody. Welcome back to I'll Read What She's Reading. I'm Reggie.
I'm Mikayla.
And I'm Kennedy.
And we have a very special guest with us today, someone who we are so excited to be interviewing. We've been peeing our pants. You've been hearing us yap about her books from the second we picked them up. Welcome, JESSA Hastings.
Yay!
Thank you so much for having me.
We're so excited to have you. It truly is an honor.
Yeah.
I know we said that before we started the call, but we just feel so special that we get to sit and chat with you, and it feels surreal to, be eating up all your words that we've been reading for so long and then get to see you. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
We made a list of authors that we want, like dream authors we wanted to have on the podcast, and you were one of the top authors. We never truly thought,
That's so nice.
we didn't think we'd be able to get you on our podcast, but here we are.
Yeah.
We're so excited.
Here we
Oh
are.
my gosh.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're glad.
Where are you
We're
guys?
in Utah.
Utah.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Cold here.
Is that
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty warm right now, but it's usually the
snow
winters
is
are brutal.
starting to melt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty bipolar weather,
It's been
but
cold in Nashville, but it's spring
Yeah.
today for sure.
Nice.
Lucky. That's so
Sounds
fun.
like a dream.
Beautiful day.
yeah. Well, to kind of start us off, tell all of our listeners a little bit about you and your story and how you became an author.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a fairly unconventional story. I'd always wanted to be a writer, and was the kind of kid that would like read a book and didn't like the ending, so would like rewrite the ending, which I now realize is just fan fiction, but I didn't know that at
Yeah.
the time. Like I felt like I was so ahead of the curve. I wrote an iteration of Magnolia Parks like in 2016, I want to say. Like it was very much a response to like I had a baby and she just didn't sleep ever, and I was just like losing my mind and kind of just needed an escape to feel like a person again. And so kind of just started writing, and wrote earlier iterations of Magnolia 1, 2, and 3 there in between like 2016 and 2017, and they were sort of like technically done, but like retrospectively I would now recognize whenever I finished other books, like I know when I finished a book and I don't actually think of the characters again. Like they're kind of just like once it's done, it's woof. Whereas Magnolia and BJ really very much stayed quite present in my mind. And then it was in, I want to say like October 2020, I started dreaming of them like very vividly. And I knew really quickly, oh, this is what I need to do for this story to be like right. So I wrote Magnolia 1, like as it is now. I wrote that in December 2020, The Long Way Home in January 2020, and then Daisy 1 in January 2021, and then Daisy in like April 2021.
Wow.
And like very quickly back to back. And at the same time, like I started sending it out to publishers, and I got really good kind of feedback from them, just being like, oh, we really like this, but we don't know where to place it. Like the publishing industry is super calcified. They don't like genre bending. They don't like anything that doesn't fit in a specific kind of category. And so they were like, we like this was enjoyable, but we don't know what to do with it. It's like 50,000 words too long for the genre that we think it should be. And I was kind of like, oh, and was pretty shattered for like a good 2 weeks, and worked with an editor who like worked at one of the big 5 publishers that I like. He freelanced for me, and he was, I'm presume well-intentioned, but he was like, yeah, like he edited it down and kind of made all of the characters sound the same. So lost all of their voices, and also like took away like 50,000 words. And I was kind of like, well, no, like this feels stupid and like lost, like the characters were gone. So then I was like, fuck you. I added 10,000 words to my original word count and then was like, I'm going to do it myself. Just see what happens. Like, have a crack at it. It was sort of like a magical moment in time where my brother-in-law and one of the boys I grew up with in Australia were like launching their creative agency. And so I worked with them to like do the covers with Emmy, who's my best friend who does all my covers, and kind of just have like a really strong branding and ethos for the series, which I think ended up helping bamboozle people into thinking it was published when it wasn't, because it kind of didn't. It had more of an air of it being traditionally published. Like I remember when it first came out, reading a review, which I don't do anymore, reading a review of someone saying, oh, she's just money grabbing. She's obviously got a multi-book deal with publishers, and that's why it's ended like this. And I was like, I wish, like, no one took it. So then I did Magnolia 1 came out in July 2021. Daisy 1 came out in December 2021, and they both did really well for self-publishing numbers, but like self-publishing numbers are like honestly pretty depressing. Like they're and so they were doing really well for that. I knew the book was doing well and quite quickly had like a very vocal sort of like grassroots readership. Like people just really cared about it, but in a much smaller number. And then in July 2022, when Magnolia, The Long Way Home came out, we don't really know what happened. Like we weren't running ads or anything. Like the book just came out and it just went, and it was like the craziest experience of my life. Like it was like I don't know, to my publisher's dismay, I literally don't know what happened. Like but then it was like a month later, I had every publisher of my dreams knocking on my door, being like, we'll take it, we'll have whatever. It was a dream scenario, and it has afforded me like I'm very lucky it went like that, because it has given me, obviously my books have not just stayed long, they've gotten longer. And because of what happened and how my numbers were so good by the time that the publishers were coming to me, they were like better than publishing numbers are really. I had a really good hand for leveraging, and I said I'd only sign with people if they let me basically do what I want to do, as much as a publisher will let you do that. And so there's that's why they're so long. And just like that, that was so long too. I'm never brief ever. So there it is.
We love how long they are.
Oh yeah, I wish
we
they
want
were
more.
Yeah, I wish they were 200 pages longer. Oh my gosh.
Do you know what's so funny? This is actually a scoop, and don't ask any follow-up questions because I can't talk about it yet. But I did over summer. No, that's summer in Australia. Over Christmas, I wanted to write a novella, and I went to write this novella, and then it became 90,000 words, and it was like just my agent was like, do you know what a novella is? I was like, well, I tried. I tried so hard.
Oh, that's awesome.
No, I just love how much you I feel like that shows how much you care about your characters, and it'd be doing them a disservice to write them any shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I have worked out in the last couple of years? Because I don't actually read a lot of books that are like genre similar. Like I'm not a big fiction reader. But what I have learned, both with like any kind of storytelling, whether that's books or like TV has become now, in the olden days of storytelling, and by the olden days, I mean 2003, like where TV was really good. They used to, like when the seasons of like OC or Gossip Girl were 22 episodes. Season 1 of the OC was 27 episodes long, which I actually think I learned a lot of my writing from television more than my books are so dialogue heavy. Learned more about writing from TVs than I did from books. That in those days, you spent so much more time with the characters. Now, because of like the streaming model, like most TV shows that go to stream are 6, sometimes max 12 episodes long. And so you're really only ever with the characters for this, like, for whatever moment is the most intense. They're not lived in characters. You don't know them very well. There's definitely a reason why I don't know who has a comfort show that was made after like 2010. Like this, they just don't exist because you don't know the characters as well anymore. It's not as intimate. And so I think that the reason why people have latched on to Magnolia and Daisy how they have, and why they love them and why they feel like they're real characters, is because of the like quiet moments of nothing in between, where like she's in the kitchen and she's making a cup of tea, or like the passing moments that would absolutely under no circumstance on television ever make it past like the editing floor. The same with like editors now. Like one of the US publishers of Into the Dark wanted it to be significantly shorter, and I was like, well, no, because the humanity of the characters is in the breadth of the book. Like, you need the space. There needs to be breathing room for these people to actually be people. And so I think that's I won't ever write short books because I think they need to feel real. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's what we love about your books, and everything you just said was said so perfectly, and I've never thought about it that way, but that makes so much sense, and it's so beautiful.
Like, what's your comfort show? I guarantee it's before.
I was thinking that while you were talking. Like, no, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Because you spend so much time with them. The Gilmore Girls, you spend so much time with them. New Girl, you spend so much time with them. Friends, and you do these like very lived in regular things that makes it feel like they're actually fully fleshed people, as opposed to like Outer Banks, which I love. I love Outer Banks. I really do. And I'm so excited every time a new season comes out. But I don't go back and rewatch it because it's so high intensity. Like, you're never catching your breath. How could it ever be a comfort show? It is exhausting. You know, same with Stranger Things. I actually do watch Stranger Things, and I'm stressed the whole time watching it every time I do a rewatch. But I rewatch it from like a storytelling perspective because I'm like, it's very well done and they've crafted it so well. And before every season of Stranger Things, will rewatch it, so I like catch everything I need to catch. But God, like, it's brutal. Like, you're like so tired after doing it. Whereas in the olden days, in OC, there was like, I don't know, there was a whole ass episode where Ryan played soccer, and you never hear about it ever again. Like, it's just like, you know, he's just a kid.
Yeah.
He's trying shit. Like, I really appreciate that. It made me like the characters. So I think that's why I do it.
Well, and it makes the characters feel more like real people. I finished the up to where Magnolia Parks is at, and I was so depressed because I was like, these are my friends. I have such an emotional connection to them because you show the mundane and you show every ounce of them as characters. And I think that's why your books feel so different, because most books aren't that way. It's not just the fact that your books bend genres. It's the fact that you include all of that, and not a lot of other people do.
Yeah, I think, and that's where I feel really lucky, because I think there would be many editors who don't have an appreciation for that. Like, they'd be like, what is this? Why? This is unnecessary. And I'm like, well, no, it's just meant to feel lived in. Like, you're meant to feel like, I've always written Magnolia as though you're like the invisible member of the box set. Like, that's always supposed to be how it's felt. And that sort of has spilt over into everything I write. You're the confidant of whoever is talking. Like, you're in the inner circle. And that is partial. That is just sort of my writing style for sure. But in doing that, it's like, I usually write my characters not dissimilar to how the sorts of things like I would share, especially Magnolia. Like Magnolia is just, she and I, we are one. And her blabbery oversharing is like, that's me with my best friend. Like I'll, I don't know what I'm going to eat for dinner. Help me pick what I'm going to eat for dinner. This was the consistency of the poo I just took. Like, like I will tell her everything. And I do think that it does paint them. It does make them be like, I think that's why this is my favorite thing that people say to me is, oh, like they feel like they're my friends. Oh, I was lonely before and then I found friends in the book. Like I'm like, oh, literally the dream.
Yeah. Well, we've always said that your writing feels like anything, unlike anything we've ever read before. And so I feel like that goes really well into our next question, which is, what is your writing process like and how do you get inspired? Because you've already shared, television and stuff like that. But is there what else? Because to me, your books feel like, I've always said this, that your books feel like poetry to me. Like they're like poetry books to me.
Well, I'll go process first. My process has changed a lot in the last couple of years as I've gotten more and more busy. In the olden days of where writing was like really easy and fun, which was pre-published days, I used to just like lock myself in a room and I would write really intensely for 2 weeks, and then I'd do nothing for 3 weeks, and then I'd write really intensely for 2 or 3 weeks, and that was it. And that was just kind of like, that's how I wrote Magnolia 1, 2, 3. Sorry, they're all MPU to me. All of the books until Into the Dark were written like that, including Never, but Never took longer because Never is like super immersive. And so Never, I think, took 8 weeks, which was like at that point in time, the longest it had ever taken me to finish a book. And that was, so just kind of like really, I have ADHD. So I think the hyperfixation probably really helps. And so would just like lock myself away, work, not really sleep, and then like be a vegetable for like 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 weeks, and then work again. In the last couple of years, I've had to sort of recalibrate what my writing process looks like. I don't love it. Like it just is now kind of like a means to an end, where it's kind of, I write a lot on my phone because I kind of just have to catch the moments where I can. And I do this funny sort of writing now where like the conditions of will, especially, I wrote in like, I'd half written Conditions of Will back in 2018. And that part of it, like that first half of the book, is as it was then. But when it kind of popped into my mind in March this year, when I had a lot of work stuff going on and was kind of like, oh, I really need to be in control of the story myself again, picked that back up again, and very much was lost in the process of like, oh, how do I, when there are other demands of me that I didn't have that many before. Now that there are so many other things that require my attention, how do I find the space to write? And really, I started this weird thing where it's like, I have a shorthand for writing. And so like every single chapter will be dialogue first. It's always based around dialogue. And then I'll write whatever conversations take place. Easy. Dialogue is the easiest thing in the world for me. Dialogue first, and then I'll go back up and sort of like, I have these funny like symbols that I'll use to like know this needs to expand. You need to like focus in on the eye contact between these two characters here. You need to like, I have these symbols. I just put in the symbols, and then usually in between the dialogue, my brain will just organically do that sort of like very typical of me prose, where it's like quite floral and metaphor-y, that just comes out in the wash. And so then I'll go back, and it's a really disjointed writing experience for me, honestly, at this point, which I don't love. But that's kind of like, it is what it is for now. Like, that's how I'm writing. I'm working on a couple of things at the minute, and that's how I'm having to write those things. Over Christmas with the novella, I actually I had the intense experience again, and I loved it. Like, it was such a joy. So that would be my ideal. Like, I really wish that is what I was afforded. But at the minute, that is my current process. And what was part 2 of the question? I forgot.
Well, just where do you draw your inspiration from?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, actually. There's never that one time there has been a thing where I when I watched To All the Boys I Loved Before. When that came out on Netflix, I was like, oh, that looks like that would be really fun to write. Like, I want to write something like that. And so I went into my room and was like, I'm going to write this. I want to think of an idea, like just think of an idea. And immediately, as when I sat down on my bed, this idea dropped into my head. And I was like, I don't want to write that. That is not the same sort of like light, fluffy thing that I'm looking to write right now. But another idea never came. Like, and that idea sort of just like, to me, ideas are a bit like balloons. Like, they can float in and I can hold on to them, and then let them go. And if they still stay around anyway, that's kind of where I'll start paying attention. Like, I have infinity ideas of stories. It's only the ones that like are like tapping away in my mind that I really can afford to pay attention to. And so I wrote that one. I did write that book in total in 3 weeks, and that hasn't been published yet because I wrote it such a long time ago that it's just sort of like it's just in the background. So I need to pay attention to that. But that was a really interesting experience for me where I was like, I'm consciously like, I'm going to write something about this. The rest of everything else that I've written really just arrived on its own without any sort of like level of consciousness for me. Like, it was just like Magnolia, the origin of Magnolia's character was I used to write down in a note on my phone all of the things that I didn't feel like I could say out loud to other people. And that sort of like formed the tone of Magnolia's voice. And then one day I read all of these things and her name just popped into my head. And then as soon as her name popped into my head, I knew her friendship group. I knew about BJ. I knew all of these things. And then the story was just there. And I felt like I was being told the story as I was writing the story. And that is sort of just my, just the way that it goes. Like, I think the more I've written, the more I've understood. I think I probably have like a bit of a unique gift with storytelling where I can sort of see, it's like a path. Like, most of the time when a story drops into my head, it feels like a path rolls out in front of me and I can peer down it and be like, oh yeah, that's going to work. And if an idea comes in, I can tell very quickly if that's going to work in this path or if it would take it down a path I'm not interested in going in. Like, and my brain's really good at doing that. But yeah, there's not, I wouldn't say that the stories are like deeply, I don't think, inspired by anything. Magnolia's based on a younger version of me, and I had a very dramatic like teen years and early 20s. But I would say that's like, yeah, I don't have like a great being like, oh, the clouds and sky, you know what I mean? Like, it was just like the never, I remember being jealous of Twilight and being like, I want to write something that is like fantasy. And then I was in a nail salon at a beach in Sydney, and then never popped into my head when I was 18. And I was like, oh, this is a pretty good idea. I'll write that. So I guess maybe most of the time they just like, I would say the stories arrive like plop, fully formed, and it doesn't, and they feel quite separate from me as well, which is a funny thing. Like, I would say, like, I just do what I'm told to do. Like, the muses tell me, and which means oftentimes, like, I have very little ego when it comes to, like, the story, because to me it's like I'm just doing what I'm told. Like, the story is the master, I am the servant, and like I just do what I'm told. That's all.
This is like a surreal experience to get to experience what's inside your brain. And
Are you so
No.
scared?
I love it.
I am just like enthralled with you right now. This is so fun to like see the process of all these characters, because it's such an immersive story. And so like for you to just say like I just do what I'm told, I love it. But like it's crazy that your brain works like that, because I could never. And so I really truly think you have such a gift, and I think you really have just like grasped it and just like ran with it, and it's incredible. I love it so much.
Thank you. That's so nice.
I'm just obsessed.
Well, it's just crazy because I could never write a book, and I also could never write a book, though, a book that feels like yours. Like, we talk about this all the time, and people will ask, hey, what book is similar to Magnolia Parks, or what can I read that gives off the same vibes? And genuinely, it's really hard for me to come up with something, because your books just feel different, and in talking to you, it all makes sense. It's like a full circle moment for me as a reader to be like,
thank you.
oh, this is why. So
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing that I would say, to your point, that's a hard thing about the publishing industry, which is like, honestly, it's a really calcified industry. If you look at the way every other medium has changed in the last, I don't know, 200 years, like books hasn't. Like, it's publishing is what it was 200 years ago. Music has evolved, television has evolved, film has evolved. Books are, for the most part, the same. Like, there's like, in the UK, I think there's 3 printing presses total. Like, that, it's like crazy. Like, it really hasn't changed. And so I don't know if it's a like a fear mentality, where, because books went through a very big dip in like the 2000s. I don't know if it's a response to that or what, but like, there's a reason that every book cover, for the most part, looks the same. Like, when there's a good book cover and when there's not, and whether some people hate my book covers, some people love my book covers, they don't look like other book covers. That's the thing. And that was what was so controversial about the shoes, is that they did look more like other book covers, and that was the publisher's prerogative. Like, there is a thing in publishers where they just don't want to upset the status quo for whatever reason, which is just not my ethos as a creator at all. But as far as like for other people, both like existingly published authors or people that are coming up in the industry, what they're told and what they're learning is that like they kind of have to just be like everyone else. Like, most books that I have, like, I've tried to read other books of the people that read my books. When they love other books, I try to read them, and like the dialogue is overtly written by a woman. Like, the boys all sound like no real men that I know ever talk the way that men often sound in many fiction books, which is something that I've worked really hard at, trying to make sure the tone of the boys sounds like the tone of actual boys. And like, I hate reading Magnolia Parks 1, because I'm like, I've gotten so much better at it now. Like, I'm so good at crafting a masculine voice, whereas like before with BJ and Christian in the ones, I was very much still learning. But I think that the industry doesn't really want there to be it kind of, it's like whitewashing of like, so it sort of feels tonally the same. And if editors are sort of like taught to do the same practice, like the guy that tried to cut Magnolia down by 50,000 words and made all the characters sort of sound like gender neutral, that was, if there's multiple people doing that, like, of course everything sort of ends up feeling and kind of sounding the same, which I think is really problematic because then it stops being art. And I view books and words as like an expression of art. And I think that people that I can always tell when I'm reading when people come into reading my books really not knowing what they're in for, because there is a certain type of reader like you guys who just are so delighted by the change and really embrace the change and are kind of like comfortable in the discomfort of Magnolia, which is like I have always said and maintain that like I don't promise happy endings, I just promise it to be like real life. Like I'm trying to have my art imitate life. Like I want it to feel real. I want them to feel like realistic people. All bows aren't going to get tied up because that doesn't happen. Like you always are left with like some kind of question at any point in your life. And so I'm like very comfortable with that, but I do get so many people being like, that's, you didn't answer. I'm like, I'm not going to. That's no, you don't that's just not
It's
the
life.
kind of writing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that that's a really hard thing about the industry right now. And I feel for people because unless you have leverage, and I think it's then it's like the responsibility of the few of us who have been allowed to have a voice to then be like, no, I'm not going to make this sound like everyone else. Like it was Into the Dark was a battle actually for as far as like publishing goes, when they were wanting to like cut things down, or like, you know, there was an editor who was like, Magnolia's eating disorder isn't resolved. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you've had an eating disorder, it's never resolved. It doesn't resolve. You'll have it for forever. You'll have those thoughts for forever. And it's so I think that there's just like the people who can push back, you do need to push back because it lets, you know, that there doesn't need to be another book that sounds like Magnolia Parks. There needs to be a book that sounds like that person. People just need to be able to be empowered to sound like themselves and empowered in their own tone. And I think that, you know, like people, I don't think there's, you know, everyone borrows things from different people. Like I feel like I learnt a lot of that sort of like emotive inner monologue that my characters often have. Like I feel like I learnt that from Grey's Anatomy, like and did like, you know, pulled a lot from that sort of experience. And then where I find a lot of my like something that I feel like is quite specific to me with my writing, with the metaphors especially, is like I really love science, so a lot of my metaphors have like a real scientific grounding or background, and I will do like parallels in nature to like the human experience, and that is, it's like wafty and it's floral and it's not for everyone, but it is unique to me, and I don't think it needs to be something that someone else does, but someone else needs to feel empowered by that or inspired by that to then find their own version. Because I think that we live in this society now where like everyone kind of looks the same, everyone kind of dresses the same, where or music sounds the same. Like there's not a lot of individuality left. So yeah, I hope that like people start looking for that again.
Well, I love that you pushed back so much, because I feel like we're a little bit of seasoned readers and we can tell that things are starting to sound very much the same, and it becomes very like mundane and like repetitive. And I think it's so fun to read things that are different, and I think it's when we can have like the most thought-provoking conversations are when they're different. And like you bring out characters where we've had so many discussions about like the inner monologue or the conversations that your characters have, and it's just refreshing. And I think the publishing industry is doing a disservice by letting people not have their voice and like having creative liberty over their characters and their stories, because I think they think we like the same things, but I think we're turning into a generation where we want things to be different and not be so like repetitive. Like we want things to be unique. And so I just I love your story. And I love that you can kind of like tell us the insight of that, because I would have never guessed that you got so much pushback from your stories. And I think it's great.
It's wild to hear. I mean, everything about your books is genuinely unique. I remember reading the first Magnolia Parks book, and it was like, I mean this in like a nice way. It was a jarring experience because I hadn't read anything like that, and I had never felt the way that I felt about characters reading your book. Like I loved them and I hated them at the same time. And that's the purpose, right? But then it's also crazy to me that your covers of your books are some of my favorite covers of books of all time. So the fact that they wanted to change them and make them a little bit more mainstream is crazy to me, because you look at them and they're stunning and beautiful. Your best friend does a fantastic job. But then not only that, after you read the books, there's so many Easter eggs. I just can't imagine them wanting to just make a decision to change those. I remember scouring the internet trying to find the original covers because they're...
And so my UK publishers were truly incredible in that whole situation, where they had told me that they were going to want to do a mass market cover, and when the shoes were released, and they were just really kind of like it was a controversial release. And it was actually very traumatic for me, because I had to be like, yay, like you have to back it in. It doesn't serve me well to not back it in. But I mean, the numbers now speak for themselves, and I feel confident in my publishers, and we have such a great relationship where they're like, it outsells the original covers, outsell the shoes. I'm bamboozled every time I do a signing by how many more originals I'm signing versus the shoes, which is just incredible. And it was amazing. But like, to their credit, they did something they'd never done before, where they were like, oh shit, we're going to do simultaneous covers indefinitely. And so in the UK, the original covers and the shoe covers, I mostly see the shoes there, honestly, but like in some stores I will see the shoes. But yeah, that was like a really unique thing that they did, and I was really grateful that they did that. They were an amazing partner, to have done that, and to sort of identify, we haven't actually served the fandom well in doing this, and they corrected it and made sure that it's like available in perpetuity, which I very much have a lot of respect for. I don't really care about, like, mistakes are fine. People make mistakes, and as long as you're like owning up to them and you're like, sorry, cool, have you?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's no, I am delighted that it's kind of gone how it's gone, and now it's really like, I've never had any pushback from covers ever again. Like, it's really just kind of like and it's so crazy to me when I go into a bookstore. I'm like, why do they all have like flowers in the background, and like that hand paint, like that painted sort of look, a pastel title with the name then in a sans serif font? Like, I'm like, what are we doing? It doesn't have to be like that. But I think that people, I guess the other thing I would say is, like, the industry it's not a lucrative industry to be in. Like, you can't be making books for the love of money. That much is true. And so I think that then as well, like, when you're maybe on the fresher side of things, if they're saying, well, this is going to be more successful, you're like, why do you need to eat? so okay, like if you say so. There would be some rolling. So I think a lot of this has to come from the top, where they just like someone somewhere needs to kind of just have a love of story like reinstilled in them, and someone needs to be a little bit more risk taking in the decisions that they make, because at the minute, you know, like the publishing industry has gone through trends. Like there was a time after Twilight where every fucking book was about werewolves or vampires. Like they just want to sell the things that sell. And so I think that, you know, it's always so interesting where like the sorts of things that publishers will push back on, like my Never publishers, who I have an incredible relationship with, and they're doing Conditions of Will. They're my US publishers for those two books. They have sometimes the things that they will be like, oh, we need to, like, you know, I have a book that's set in the UK, and they were like, they changed all of the spelling to the US, and they were like, you know, the Americans mightn't know. I'm like, I think we'll figure it out. Like, I think it'll be okay, guys. Like, it's not that, you know, I think that there's this funny thing in the publishing industry where it's like, let's serve the lowest common denominator. And whereas my ethos with storytelling is always going to be like, no, let's serve the highest common denominator and invite people to sit at the big boy table. Like, let's, you know, try to be better.
Yeah.
Oh, well, in reading your words, your covers, like it's books are art, and I feel like yours specifically really emulate that.
Thank you.
To kind of go along with that, we've heard about like your inspiration and your story, which has been so inspiring, but I'm curious to know if there's any certain lines that you have written that personally have stuck with you and are your favorite, or if there's ones that your readers you found like the most.
Yeah. The one that always comes to mind for me is it's Magnolia, I think, in The Long Way Home, and she says he laughs and it sounds like I'm ringing the doorbell of the house I grew up in. That to me was like sort of like a benchmark as far as like what I consider my standard of writing to be. And I remember when I was in a shopping center in Australia when that like popped into my head, and I was like wrote it down as quick as I could. That I think is probably one of my favorite lines I've written, and that's the one that sort of like floats to the top of my mind when asked that question. I get quoted back. What do I get quoted back a lot? I get quoted back the thing about Christian knowing Daisy's freckles too. I get a lot of In Another Life. I get a lot of
How's the weather?
How's the weather? How's the weather? Yeah, I mean, I think I have there are certain like segments I'm really proud of. I think I was always I don't feel like this ever gets the attention I personally feel like it deserves, but I really like the part, I think it's in book 1, and BJ says something along the lines of like, he'll love her in every, like, fuck it, I'll love her in every spectrum of light, even the absence of it. Like that I adore. And there's another time he says something along the lines of like, he'll die, he'll like something like he'll crawl, like he doesn't care, like fuck it, he'll die in her arms, or crawl like on the doorstep trying to get back into it, something like that. Those sorts of things are a little bit stick out in my mind. And then there's Never, for me, is the funnest to write in so many ways, getting to do sort of like taking abstract qualities and like making them real, and sort of like the imagination, how imagination rich never is such a delight. And I'm very proud of the baggage claim.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't toot my own horn very often, but I was like,
Yeah.
that was a good one.
Well, it's crazy because I feel like your writing, we've talked a lot about Magnolia Parks, but your writing shines so well in Never. The way you can write that whimsical environment, I felt like I was plopped into Neverland and I never left. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was like, I mean, Never predated Magnolia by an infinity of time. Like, I think I thought of Never, I was 18, so a good like 6, 7, I can't remember how old I was when I wrote Magnolia now the first time. A long time. It existed a long time. So it was very developed in my brain by the time I started writing it. And it was also such like a personal feat because I care so much. Like the Peter Pan story would have been like one of the stories that really made me want to be a writer. Like I was just so like floored by it. So I felt like a real, like a weightiness to it that, yeah, I mean, it's so fun. Like it's actually, it's not number 2 is hard. Like it's hard to write. But it is such a delight at the same time. Like just to be there and to sort of get to do like the funny abstract things of like, I don't know if it's mentioned by name in book 1, but it is essentially because it's what the baddie does at the end. But like the galactic black market for like the bottled ephemeral. I'm like, in what world do you get to say things like that? Like it is really fun. It's a fun one, even when it's emotionally disastrous.
Yeah, that's accurate. Would you say, so I know Conditions of Will comes out April 1st. Would you say there's a book that you would suggest people start with if they haven't read your books yet? What would you suggest?
Oh, that's a great question. If you're wanting to not get sucked in and feel like you have to, like people usually are a bit like with Magnolia because you just have to know what happens. So if you don't have a ton of time, I would say starting with Conditions is great because it's a standalone, or Never because I haven't written number 2 yet. So you can't get stuck. But I mean, as long as they're reading the MPU in order, I don't mind. Every now and then we'll hear these horror stories of people just reading like the Magnolias or the Daisies, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Have you heard about people doing like tandem reads of your books? Have you seen that?
I have, and I actually think that would be such an interesting experience. I personally haven't done it. I sort of tandem wrote Into the Dark and The Long Way. No. I get the names confused. Long Way Home and The Great Undoing were sort of written in tandem because I felt like I learned a lot from writing Magnolia and Daisy separately. And Magnolia was published before when I was writing Daisy, and there were things that I was like, fuck, I should have written them side by side and made sure everything was like perfect. Like the biggest one of that is when I wrote Magnolia 1, Daisy felt very much like she was a brunette, but by the time I wrote Daisy 1, I was like, ooh, I think Daisy's a blonde, but it was done. And so now it's like, whenever people say to me, I don't know why I think Daisy's a blonde, I'm like, you it was meant to be. But it was already published. And so, yeah, no, the tandem, in theory, it should work. But I mean, God bless, it sounds exhausting.
I know. Tandem read sounds not... I feel like you can't enjoy the books individually.
Yeah.
To me.
I think if you read them before, it would maybe be interesting to then do a tandem read, because there's like one of the things I did quite consciously, especially with Magnolia and Christian, who I consider to be like unreliable narrators, that there's like somewhere in between is the truth. So like in Magnolia's version of events, it's always going to be dramatized. In Christian's version of events, always going to be dramatized. And so when they were telling different stories in Magnolia 1 and Daisy 1, I knew myself that the truth lay somewhere in the middle. And so like it was always a conversation with the publishers whenever there would be a chapter that echoed a chapter that had been previously published. They'd be like, it's not identical. And I'm like, well, no, it's not meant to be, because it's from the perspective of someone else. And like the same way that if I later on recall this conversation to my husband, I'm going to recall it differently to the way you guys are going to recall it. And you're going to latch onto certain parts and you're going to remember, well, she said this and this and this. And like the way that it will get reiterated back is going to be different. And so there was an intentionality there. And I think that would be an interesting part for a tandem read, to be like, oh, whoa, that is, you've experienced that situation very differently. That would be an interesting part of the tandem read, I guess.
That would be very interesting.
I've never thought about that. That's
Yeah.
actually genius to keep it separate. That's so smart. Kind of going along the same lines, is there a certain character that you've written that is harder? Like, it kind of sounds like Magnolia might have been maybe the easiest character because she's similar to you. Who has been the hardest character for you to write?
Oh, what's actually so devastating is it's a character I can't talk about yet, but there is a boy that I've written who was the hardest character I've ever written, because he was so complex. And to have him remain true to himself, but also be someone that you could still like, that was a genuine challenge. I'll come back and talk about it when I have to talk about it. Of the characters that exist, Christian or Daisy probably are. No, Daisy is actually not that hard. Christian and maybe Julian. So like the boys are always more of an effort to write for me than the girls. Trying to think. None of them feel impossible. The hardest one was that boy. And Peter was quite hard to write, and you never hear from his personal perspective. But it was just sort of like a painful thing to write him how I felt I had to write it. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, that wasn't
that was a great answer. That was great.
I think it's so fun how each individual reader kind of attaches to like almost like a different character, because I feel like we all have attached to like different characters, which I think is so fun to like. Yeah, it's fun for us all to like the same character, but I think it's even more fun when we have like different, opinions about characters, and I just think it's great. And I think, sorry, I just can't stop raving about you because you're just the best ever. And I love the way you write characters. And
no, I thank you. Because some people don't. It's fair to say. Like I know, BJ's obviously a really controversial character, so much more than I ever could have anticipated. Like I'm genuinely baffled most of the time about BJ's. People either love BJ or hate BJ, and to me, he's just human. And I think that's one of those things where in the larger picture of things, what has been a really interesting like commentary for me has been how quick as a society we have become at like tossing people away and like not wanting to give them a chance to evolve and be better. And, that's not to say that every single person you give a chance to grow or evolve will take it and, become better than they were. But he did, and he does. And I think I'm only interested in writing complex characters. Like, it's so fun. Like, it's so much more fun when, a character is a little bit emotionally unhinged, or they're like reactive, or like when you know a character really well and you're writing that character, getting to know there's certain buttons, or like how that this will trigger this, which will trigger this person, which will trigger this person. It's like, for characters to feel like fully formed, fully fledged people, they have to be flawed. Like, it's very boring to read about a perfect guy. There's a reason that, like, it's like, there's a reason TV shows end once the couples get together.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, this, or they, if they don't end, they should have ended, because it gets really boring.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to, people have to be human, and they have to, yeah, I don't know. It is really crazy to me when people are like, I don't think Magnolia is that likable in book one. She is, and that was a real journey for me, as it was a lot of self-reflection of like the earlier iterations of Magnolia were a lot more kind of like restrained, because I knew she was a reflection of me, and I hadn't fully accepted all of the ways in which I was culpable in my youth for my own bad behavior. And it was like, it took a lot of growing up for me to be able to be like, she sucked. I sucked. I did that to boys. That was my MO. And now I'm kind of like, oh, well, I was 19. Like,
Yeah.
I'm 36 now. It doesn't matter. Like, I made mistakes in my youth, and I think that the sort of like instinct that some authors might have to preserve the reputation or the light in which a character is like viewed in only ever is a disservice to the story, because then it means like it's just not real.
Yeah.
None of it's
And that's what I love, is that it feels real, and you get to like hold hands with these characters through so much. Like, I think of every event that happens, especially like in Magnolia Parks, and to get to experience that on a different level than I've been able to experience things like that in other books is such a gift. I don't know if that really makes sense, but yeah, you've done an excellent job capturing that in your books. So yeah.
That means so much.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you've seen everybody compare your books to Gossip Girl. But when I try to tell people about these, I'm like, yeah, it's like Gossip Girl, but genuinely it's just the human experience. It's like experiencing your youth and finding out who you are and who your friends are, who they're not, and just going through trauma and finding your way through trauma. It's literally the human experience. And so if Magnolia was likable from the beginning, it would have been boring to look at Magnolia or any of the characters from book one to where they ended up. You see their character development, and you do that so well. The character development is unmatched.
Thank you. That's so nice. Thank you. No, I think it's really funny. Whenever people, the Gossip Girl comp is like inevitable, because they're just like wealthy dummies. And so I think I think you can consume Magnolia, and it appears, I don't know how, but I have noticed that there is there's a sect of people that can consume Magnolia not dissimilar to how you would like consume reality TV, where it feels like frivolous, and it's like a sort of like silly, like will they, won't they? Like sometimes whenever I see it like pop pop up on like a holiday beach read, I'm like, are you okay? Like this feels or like a really stressful vacation read, but okay, like whatever, do you? That I think there must be a way that you can kind of like, if you're not looking for the depth in the characters. And I guess maybe in all fairness, I think that people earlier on, before all of the books were out or where we're up to, were you could be the characters again, like I write for a long game. Like I always knew Magnolia 1 was Magnolia 1. I had already written Magnolia 2 and I knew what was going to happen in Magnolia 3. And so for me, like she was never who she was always going to be in book 1. Neither was BJ. I knew BJ had to do what he did and had to go through the journey. They had to go through that for them to kind of like become who they become. But I don't think people are necessarily willing to go on a journey with people in general. Like I feel like that's true. Like people don't really want to give time and space for people to evolve. So why would they give that to characters? And then as well, like, yeah, I think if you're looking at the book from the frivolous point of view, then they're just unlikable characters. And that's fine because they are unlikable characters, but they're just human. Like, and I think you probably don't get to see, I think the depth of their humanity is probably not fully actualized until you're in the twos. And then you start being like, whoa, there's a lot of pain here. And then where I think people have really loved going back to book 1 is like, it's all mentioned by name. Like it wasn't like I was like, I knew what was going to happen, like with what happened to BJ specifically. Like that person's name is in book 1. Like he says it. And there's the same with like the other surprise in book 2, The Long Way Home, where the thing with he and Magnolia, I'm trying my hardest not to get the thing that happens with him and Magnolia, like that's by name as well. Like there, it was always there. The humanity was always there, which I think is like sort of the lesson that I hope people like take from the books, is that you really only ever know what someone is willing to tell you about themselves. And your relationship with Magnolia at that point in time in book 1 did not warrant you the knowledge that you are later granted in number 2. So you are going on an emotional journey. Your relationship with Magnolia and the rest of the characters is developing as the series goes on, where she is trusting you more and more, bringing you further and further into the world. And then you're starting to be like, oh my God, I didn't know. I had no idea. But isn't that just the way that it is with like people, where you're like, that person can be like, seem like such a bitch. And then you talk to them and you're like, oh my God, I had no idea. Like that's kind of the point. Like you're meant to, it's like a primer for how we should just treat each other.
Yeah, it's almost like the more you get to know Magnolia, the more you start to like reveal the layers of her. And that's like literally meeting any people. I mean, we don't have the connection. The connection we have now together was not the same that we had when we first met each other. So like, it's the same with your characters and the readers. How like you just get to know a little bit more, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I had that bad thought about Magnolia. After you read some things, and you're like, I feel like such a terrible human being.
I take it back.
Yeah, I take it back.
I take it back.
Yeah.
Well, and I get so upset at people. I don't think this is a spoiler because it's like listed in the tropes, whatever. I get so upset at people when they're like, I can't read the first Magnolia Parks book because there's a cheating trope. And I'm like, okay, but you guys don't understand. This series and these books are about so much more than that. Like, it's about so much more, and I wish people would understand. And hopefully, if you're a listener and you're listening to this, you understand just how much depth, not even just the Magnolia Parks books, but all of your books have. It's about so much more than the little things and the surface level things. Like, your books are so incredibly deep. I got my sister to read your series because she reminds me of Magnolia, and I remind myself of Bridget. And so just like their relationship and some of the things they went through is the same things me and my sister went through. And so we got to connect on such a deeper level through your books. And
Oh, that
I
makes me so
I
happy.
wish people would just understand that, like, that's what your books can offer if they, for some reason, are like, I can't read it because of a cheating trope. It's so much more.
Yeah.
So much more.
Do you know what's so funny is I didn't know about tropes when I wrote the books. I was like, remember the first time someone said that to me? I was like,
Huh?
Googling. I was like, I'm not in that fiction space of like, that just wasn't me. And so every now and then I'll hear about my books having a certain trope. I'm like, used to didn't know. It was just like, you know, and I really didn't know. I mean, God, to this day, I still doesn't make sense to me that cheating is worse than murder. I'm like, okay, I guess we're just going to suspend reality on this one. I don't get it, but that seems to be like a real thing in book world. I don't know if that's because like people know real cheaters and they don't know real murderers, but I guess in the tone of my books, like everything is like paired to feel like real life. To me, I'm not like, I hold BJ and Julian to the same standard. I do think, and I maintain the line, that being a murderer is worse than being a cheater. Like that's just is the company line. Like, kill me if it's not on the House of Hastings website. Like, murdering is worse than cheating. Sue me.
Yeah.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
No.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's such the tropes thing is so fascinating to me. But I'm also like, I think if you're, I would imagine the type of person that would not read a book because there was a cheating trope or something like that probably would struggle with BJ anyway, because I think that, you know, like the book itself isn't actually like, the cheating doesn't even take place in book one. It's like a historic cheating. And that's like unpacked as the story goes on. But I think if that is such a deal breaker, then it probably is just gonna, it is a hard sell, because it's so much of like, you just have to journey it through with, you know, like, and that's not the right thing for everyone to do, but that was Magnolia's decision. The only person who had to decide whether it was okay or not was Magnolia. She decided it was, and she journeyed it through. So, I mean, yeah, I think that the cheating trope is like, to me, it's like much of a muchness. Like to me, it's like he was like 19 or something. Like it was like he was a boy, and I don't know. I honestly don't know many 19-year-old boys that didn't do something like that at one point. Like that's just a mad standard to hold the worst day or the worst thing you've ever done as like the beacon of like, this is who this person is. Like, fuck. If someone said that to me, no one would ever talk to me again. Like, it's a ridiculous standard for people. So yeah. What were we talking about?
I don't know, but I'm loving it.
I know.
Me too.
I know. No, I don't. I love how unserious you can kind of be with some of your characters, because I know a lot of people have claimed that they are obsessed with Julian. And if I recall correctly, at one point you said, I could kill him. I could.
I literally, this was brought up to me at a dinner table the other day, where they were asking about like, because I still get the messages, like people, they're straight, like, you know, I know who these girls, I don't know if they don't realize that Instagram tells you when someone's made a new profile. So I can see when it says profile created in February 2025, right after I've blocked the other person or like stopped responding to it, you know. So I'm like, I can see what's happening. There's a pattern. But the other day I was like, the thing is that I feel like people forget is I know what happens. I'm only writing the book for everyone else at this point. I know the end of the story. I don't need to write it for me. And I don't need the money. I'll give it back if you piss me off. And then no one will ever get it. I won't write the book if they annoy me too much. I'm getting there. On the weekend, I got a message that had me be like, fuck it. I'm just going to give back the advance. I don't need the advance anymore. I'm pretty comfy. Like, it'll be fine. And Ben was like, no, well,
Maybe
let's sit
not.
on this. No, this is what I'm going to do. I know what happens in the end. He's like, well, he's very reasonable. He's like, well, you might upset some people. I'm upset. Other people.
Oh my god. Well, I feel like that kind of like segments into like kind of the pros and cons of you being so active on social media. Do you want to share some of the pros and cons of like, because we love how much you share on, you know, your stories, and you're just so funny, and we love being able to see your personality, because I feel like there are a lot of authors who just kind of are radio silent and just post when they are publishing a book. Yeah. And I feel like that's not fun. I want to know, like,
No, not fun at all.
I love watching your
No, yeah.
lives with your walking around your kitchen cooking stuff. Like, it's
cool.
so
It's
right
like
into your
carpet.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us some of your pros and cons of like being active, and then
Yeah, I mean, the pros are 100% relational based. Like, I love getting to interact with kind people and wonderful people, and like the vast majority of my readership are impossibly good people. And like, one of the things that brings me so much like pride and joy is that I've been told multiple times from people that like, this is one of the nicest fandoms people have ever been a part of. Like, I see how supportive people are of one another, and that makes me so happy. And I get told more than I would have ever imagined that like people have found their best friends through the books, because they, you know, like, I don't know how they do it, but they, like, I've been told that so many times, and that is the absolute, such an unforeseen gift of this book for me. But I'm like so honored, and I love it so much. So the people for sure is the best part of it. And like, I have ADHD. I think I said that before. I'm very fun driven. Like, I only care about having fun. Every decision I've made now that I'm like kind of in a comfortable career place is like, I make decisions if it's fun. Like, that's what I do now. I don't work with people that I don't want to work with. I don't do projects I'm not interested in doing. I don't take meetings I'm not interested in taking. And like, I just otherwise I don't do it. I'm too busy. It has to be fun. And so social media, I could never just post my books all the time. That would be so boring. And so I just like, it is just fun for whatever, like, probably much to my dismay. Like, I think I probably need like a branding help, because I'm
No, it's so fun.
No.
Like your brackets that you do. What was the one you just did? The hottie.
Oh yeah. The hottie.
Oh,
stuff.
I was invested. I could not wait.
I know. Actually, my agents were messaging me about that. They were like, the only reason I'm coming on Instagram right now is to find out.
I tuned into your red carpet live. Like,
Mhm.
I just think it's so fun to get to talk to you like this, but also see you online at a more personal level. And I know that it's not for everyone, but it's just made me love you even more. And
Thank you.
yeah, it's just really fun to see. I just, every time there's a
No, it is
story
much
bubble of yours, I'm like, can't wait.
Gotta
I
go to
never know what I'm
JESSA.
gonna expect. It's so fun. I'm crying or I'm laughing or yeah, it's great.
Yeah, no, it is literally for fun. And that's the part of it that is like the pros are, it's fun, and the people, and it's like so it's so lovely getting to interact with people and to be able to hear like what it means to people. Like it's the double-edged sword is like the reason it's amazing is primarily people, and the reason that it's terrible is primarily people. And it's luckily, like mercifully, the numbers are so tilted in the positive that it is okay. But like TikTok is like pretty scary for me. Like I don't really go on TikTok. I don't post videos anymore. I like will go and read comments and like sometimes like reply, but people just loved to hate me on TikTok. So that was like, I've definitely experienced that side of like the internet. And I really don't understand. I really don't understand what I have done or how I have portrayed myself in a way that makes people feel like my stories are open for a conversation. Like, I don't know what about me it is that gives off that energy, but like every day, yeah, like I just said, I get a little bit closer to being like, bitch, I want write it. I know. I know how the story ends.
I can't imagine messaging an author and saying like, no, you wrote it wrong.
Crazy.
I just think you're the master.
What is it about me? Why do they think they can do that to me?
I don't know. Stop coming for our girl.
Yeah.
Leave her alone.
And I mean, I take your threat very seriously. So everyone who's listening, stop pissing her off, because I want the book. Yeah, I want it too. So I'm taking it very seriously.
Or if you don't write the book, you can DM us and tell us the ending.
Give us a little synopsis. Be like, this is how it ends.
I'll give you the Cliff Notes.
No, but seriously, if you guys don't follow Jessa, you need to, because you're genuinely my favorite author to follow on social media.
It's so fun.
The amount of times that we have like screenshotted your stories and been like, oh my gosh, look what Jessa just posted. It's so funny. We love it. It's you're keeping us entertained.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly think that life is meant to have like be fun, and like you're supposed to enjoy it. And so I just love that you're just like taking it. I just want to have fun. I just want to take life with a grain of salt and just be fun, which I think is fun.
Yeah. I need to be more like that, you know?
Yeah.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, do it. Be fun. Have fun.
Well, that's what we strive to do on here. Sometimes people
think we have too much fun. And they're like, you need to be,
They're like, you need to be more serious. And we're like, but that's not fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Well, we'll kind of wrap this up. We'll do like a rapid fire for the last few questions for you. Yeah. I know you said you don't read very much, but are you currently reading anything?
I actually did try to prep for this answer. I was like, they're going to ask me what I'm reading, and I'm not going to have anything interesting to say. I did order because I really only read science or history books. I have coming this afternoon, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. So that will be my next read. That's the kind of thing that I read.
I love that. Yeah.
I love that.
Wow. You must be, I just would love to pick your brain all day, because it seems like you just read.
Great place to be.
Yeah. I don't think I could ever read that, but I love that those are really fun for you.
So you could, if you're in a hurry, you could. I just like science.
No, I love it. I'm just not a very smart person. Maybe that would like.
No, you are. No, I don't know why. The science, I feel like there's such a largest, like there's story in science, and that's what interests me. Like I find a lot of metaphors in it.
Yeah.
So like an art in science that I really like.
Yeah. Continue, because obviously it's like
it's working for you.
Yeah, it's working into your writing, and I love it.
Yeah, and you should read what you're interested in.
Yeah, so. No, I love it.
Yeah. What are some of your current obsessions right now? Like a snack, a show.
Oh my god, a snack. Okay, I'm balls deep in mini Oreos.
Oh,
yum.
And I don't know why, but they hit so much better than a regular Oreo.
It's like the cookie
it's like the sizing and the ratio or whatever it is. I'm very, very into mini Oreos. Disastrously into them. I did. So that would be my go-to snack right now. And then there's this brand of chicken tenders called Bell and Evans,
Okay.
which is like the only thing I like when I have my ADHD medicine, it switches off all of my like eating cues and like drinking cues. And so then I have like infinity of these boxes in my fridge, and I'll just know I have to cook these at 1 p.m. whether I want them or not, and then I'll eat them and I'll be fine and I won't faint. But that's like those would be my current go-to.
I love it.
As far as
Yum.
I love it. And then we have to ask this question. You can be as vague as you want. What are your future plans?
After April 1st.
After April 1st. But if you can't say, or if people piss you off,
we get it. Or maybe it's that you got a vacation coming up or anything. Doesn't have to be writing related.
Yeah.
Okay. Most of my plans are writing related. I do have some writing plans, almost all of which I am not allowed to talk about. But I will, or all I will say is that I think that there'll be a surprise this year at some point.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh, that's so fun. I can't wait.
No, it's really good actually.
Oh.
I think it's maybe my favorite thing I've ever written.
Oh,
Emmy
even better.
said that
Even better.
when I sent it to her. She said, "This is my favorite thing you've ever written."
Oh, now I'm anxiously awaiting.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
All right.
Yeah.
Put us on our toes.
Oh my gosh.
Love it.
Well, I know we're all so excited for Conditions of Will, and we're like just waiting for April 1st to come. We can't wait to.
I didn't know it was April 1st until last week.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's great. That's like so.
Yeah,
soon.
it
Yes,
is.
it
It
is.
is. And we just can't wait to be in your writing again. Just be like immersed in your story.
I think it will surprise people. I think there's a bit of a mystery.
Okay.
Ooh,
So do
yeah.
you want to tell us a little bit like about it?
Yeah, it's about this girl called Georgia. She is a body language expert. So she like reads people, knows when they're lying. Like she is called into like corporate scenarios, can tell when someone's lying. She's been trained under like one of the best. And so she has this skill set and a very dysfunctional family and has to go back to her hometown in the South that she hasn't been to in a very long time. And it's right after the death of her father, with whom she had a very estranged relationship with. And it takes place over like the course of, I don't know, like 2 or 3 weeks. And it's really interesting. Like it's a really interesting read because of what happens, because of how she reads people. So there's like a lot of the tension in a story is often like a will they, won't they, or does he like me, that's a big part of most stories. But because of her skill set, she knows very quickly where she stands with her romantic interest. And so it was a real challenge to write. It was really interesting to write. And I feel like it's really interesting. I'm trying to think if it gives it away, or if this gives anything away. To me, it feels like, did you guys watch Nobody Wants This? And we were all losing our minds because Adam Brody was so like emotionally well adjusted. It's not dissimilar to that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the boy is very different to my normal type of boy that I write. He's quite actualized, and she's quite actualized as well. And so it's a really interesting type of story. It's different, and it still feels like me. And there's still all of the metaphors and the oversharing, but it is, like I would say a huge part of like Magnolia, or I would say none of the Magnolia books would exist if any of those characters had gone to therapy before Into the Dark. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're just not healthy, well-adjusted people. They are healthy, well-adjusted people, the two main characters in Will. So it's a really interesting
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
place to
Perfect.
start a book.
Well, yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Mhm.
And especially
Thank you.
just even getting to hear more of your writing process and how your brain works, I am even more excited. So, yeah, where can people connect with you? I mean, they know your books now from this episode. Where can they connect with you online and all the things?
I mean, I don't know what my TikTok is because I don't use it very much. My Instagram is jessa.hastings.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes so people can go follow you because we encourage them to. And yeah, everyone listening, Conditions will April 1st. And thank you so much again for taking this time.
Yeah.
It was truly a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you. Me too.
Awesome.
My pleasure.